Nigeria's premium crude oil brand Kwaibo set to begin export in October. Ghana's budget deficit expected to fall to 4.9% of GDP this year against an initial projection of 5.3%. Plus, former Barclays chief remains in the hunt to buy a stake in the British lender's African business. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the program. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. We begin in the U.S., where former AIG boss Hank Greenberg is to go on trial in New York this week, over a decade after civil charges were filed. The 91-year-old, alongside the firm's former chief financial officer, Howard Smith, is accused of engineering bogus transactions to hide the insurance giant's financial difficulties. Both have denied the allegations. The charges were filed by then New York Attorney General Elliot Spicer in 2005, but Mr. Greenberg and Mr. Smith have fought them, saying they have no merit. However, the Court of Appeal said there is enough evidence for the trial to proceed. And a consortium including former Barclays chief Bob Diamond remains in the hunt to buy a stake in the British lender's African business despite the withdrawal of Carlyle Group. Diamond is looking to acquire Barclays' remaining 50% stake in Barclays Africa Group Limited via his investment vehicle Atlas Merchant Capital, following the British lender's decision in March to sell down its holding in the African unit. The consortium comprises a group of committed long-term strategic investors, and reports say Carlyle's exit from the group will not jeopardize its interest in pursuing the acquisition. As well as trying to find a buyer for the Africa business, Barclays retains the option to sell its shares in Barclays Africa in chunks via an accelerated book build or in the open market via the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And in Europe, an unconfirmed report says U.S. genetically modified seeds giant Monsanto has accepted a takeover offer from Germany's Bayer at $128 a share. Bayer's farm business produces seeds and chemicals to combat weeds and insects, but it is better known for its healthcare products, which include Alka-Seltzer. Monsanto is primarily known for its genetically modified seeds for crops including corn, soybeans, cotton, wheat, and sugar cane. Such seeds have attracted criticisms from some environmental activists. Now, the move will create the world's biggest seeds and pesticides company, valued at $66 billion. The official announcement is due soon. Now, what would this mean for the global markets? Let's talk to DWTV, Channels TV correspondent and Frankfurt Stock Exchange, Conrad Bussen. Good afternoon, Conrad. Well, I'm not so sure if Bayer has come out to make this final announcement of the takeover. This has taken several, takeover bid, and they've not succeeded. This is the fourth time. Now, if this, of course, is the final deal, what will this mean for the global market?
Well, it would mean that not only the largest agrochemical company of this world would be created, it would also mean that the biggest takeover that the German company ever planned would actually happen. And it would also mean for the markets that immediately people on the markets will start discussing what more mergers and acquisitions and takeovers they can expect. You know, there's so much cash around, there's so much cheap loans around, it's so easy to get credit for large corporations at least, that at the moment many executives in many companies of different sectors are thinking about how they can use this cheap cash and those cheap loans to grow their companies by taking over another one. In the case of Bayer and Monsanto, it's going to be interesting to see, and it's also going to be crucial for the markets, whether the integration of Monsanto will really go as planned. You know, when we had large takeovers and mergers like this, and when you look at all of them, only about half of them really went the way as they were predicted by the executives before the merger or the takeover. There are also always many problems involved, and also in this case many investors have doubts. The share price of Bayer lost 13% in the months after the first time the rumor of this merger came out to the market. And that not only has to do with some investors maybe believing that this takeover might be a bit expensive. It's actually not. The valuation of Monsanto is quite adequate, analysts say. It's between 16 and 17 times of Monsanto's earnings before taxes.
Right, Conrad, we'll sure keep our ears on the ground to see how this takeover deal turns out eventually. Now, another company that seemed to have come into the news today is Apple. Bank of England has included that company on a list of companies that qualify for its new economic stimulus bond buying scheme. Now, this means the central bank views the company as making a material contribution to the British economy. There's been a lot of speculations that this decision will anger the Silicon Valley giant's critics, who accuse it of avoiding tax on UK sales by routing them via Ireland. Is this also a concern for investors out there?
Yes, it is a concern because it sort of reignites or encourages the basic criticism that many people on the financial markets have towards those corporate bond buying schemes by the reserve banks. Remember also the European Central Bank here in the Eurozone is buying corporate bonds on the large scale. And of course, the main thing that the reserve banks should have in mind when buying those bonds should be rating. They should only buy the very best and the best reputed bonds and companies, of course. But in the case of Apple, it really becomes clear that also something else plays a role. Because, you know, when a reserve bank buys a bond of a company, that's like a big bonus for this company. It enhances the reputation for this company. It makes it easier for this company to get loans. It's good for rating of the company, which means also that it gives some sort of advantage to this company, to competitors. And this might lead to a distortion of competition, which the reserve banks should have nothing to do with. That's an opinion that you very often hear among financial people.
Right, Cora, let's quickly wrap up this conversation. VW, again, has come up. I mean, that scandal has brought up other issues since nearly a year now that scandal erupted. Now the European Commission is weighing what disciplinary action to take against states that didn't enforce environmental regulations well enough. Is this not coming rather too late?
Well, Chibi, you know, the authorities on a national level and on the European level have been very, very lax when it comes to controlling whether the cars produced and sold and driven here in Europe emit too many toxic materials. The car industry is so important that politicians just looked away. But maybe it's better that something is happening now than not at all. But you asked in particular for those sanctions that the EU Commission is planning or is said to be planning against the national governments. I think it would be a bit unfair to criticize the EU Commission too much for not acting earlier. We should keep in mind that the EU Commission is not really a government. The members of the EU Commission are appointed by the national governments. They're merely some sort of negotiator and implementer of European law in the EU, representing the national governments. So despite the fact that potential disciplinary actions against the national governments are really in the treaties of the European Union, it was not something that the EU Commission really put into effect. Now They
Thank
are
you,
doing
Conrad.
it.
Conrad, we've got to cut this conversation short here now. I'll have to take a quick break, and then when we return, we will look back home here, looking at Nigeria's economy. Do stay with us.